When Jimin is pushed mid-dance by a jealous rival, Jungkook's fury ignites, leading to a confrontation that stuns everyone in the room. "Get your hands off him." The sound cracked like lightning across the studio, silencing the murmurs, stopping the music. Heads turned. A bottle rolled and clinked along the wooden floor. Jimin lay sprawled near the edge of the practice room, one hand gripping his ribs, breath heaving. The room wasn't quiet because of the fall, it was quiet because of the man storming across the floor. Jungkook's footsteps were deliberate. Heavy. Lethal. The man who'd shoved Jimin, Andre, an arrogant new recruit from the rival dance unit, stood frozen, a smirk twitching at the corner of his lips. He didn't expect Jungkook to speak, let alone explode. "Was that part of your choreography?" Jungkook growled, his voice a low snarl that barely disguised the rage roiling beneath. "Because it looked like assault to me." The tension hung thick in the air, like the stale smell of sweat and cheap cologne. No one moved. No one dared. Jungkook didn't wait for an answer. He knelt beside Jimin, who was trying to sit up. "I'm fine," Jimin whispered, but the bruise already blooming across his ribs told another story. Jungkook's gaze never left Andre as he helped Jimin up with a gentleness that stood in stark contrast to the fury seething behind his eyes. "You think this is how you get noticed?" Jungkook said, voice calm now too calm. "By tearing someone down when you can't outshine them?" Andre rolled his shoulders, trying to maintain his cocky facade. "He was in my way." "And now," Jungkook said, standing to his full height, his shadow swallowing Andre whole, "I'm in yours." The instructor clapped once, trying to break the standoff. "That's enough. Let's reset. Final showcase round. Jungkook, you're up next." All eyes followed him as he walked to the center of the dance floor. But Jungkook didn't look at the mirrors or the camera crew watching from behind the glass. His gaze stayed on Andre like a hunter watching prey. The beat dropped. Thunderous bass. A sharp snare. And Jungkook moved. His body snapped and slithered through the choreography like liquid flame, precision and rage braided into every beat. Each stomp echoed with defiance. Each spin was a blade slicing through the air. His sweat glistened like fire across his jaw. The room forgot to breathe. By the final measure, Jungkook came to a halt directly in front of Andre. No more than a foot between them. The last beat hit and instead of posing, Jungkook stepped forward, chest to chest, eyes locked. "Now that," he said, panting, jaw clenched, "is how you earn your place." Andre blinked. His smirk was gone. Whispers erupted around the room. Someone gasped. The instructor didn't even call cut, he simply stared, stunned. Jimin, still holding his side, couldn't suppress a small smile. There was a fire in Jungkook's performance, yes, but there was something deeper, too. A promise. A warning. And for the first time since Andre had walked into their circle, he finally understood. This wasn't just a stage. It was a battlefield. And Jungkook never lost. The night after the confrontation, Seoul was soaked in a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of the dorm. Water streaked down the glass like tears Jungkook refused to shed. He sat at the edge of the practice room couch long after everyone had gone, the room dim but humming with memory. Jimin's laughter used to bounce off these walls like sunlight. Now all Jungkook could hear was the thud of his body hitting the floor. "You're still here." The voice was soft, familiar, hesitant. "Jimin." Jungkook didn't turn immediately. He heard the limp in Jimin's walk before he saw it. His breath caught in his throat. "You should be in bed," Jungkook said without looking up. "You're still hurt." Jimin chuckled, thin and broken. "That didn't stop you from nearly killing Andre in front of the entire crew." At that, Jungkook looked up. Jimin was leaning against the doorframe, hoodie half-zipped, hair damp from a shower. His cheek was flushed, his lips bitten pink like he'd been chewing them and thought. "Should I have let it go?" Jungkook asked, voice low. "Let him treat you like that and say nothing?" Jimin walked over slowly and dropped beside him, wincing as he sat. "I didn't say I didn't like it," he said quietly. Jungkook blinked. "Then why do you sound like you're about to scold me?" "Because you did it like it was personal," Jimin said, turning to face him. "And it was. Wasn't it?" There was a long silence. Then Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper. "Of course it was." Jimin's eyes searched his face. For a long time, nothing passed between them but the sound of the rain and the unspoken weight of years together. Then, "You're not just angry about Andre," Jimin said. "You're angry about me." "About what I did?" Jungkook looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Jimin's gaze dropped to the floor. "I let him push me. I didn't fight back. I froze. You were caught off guard. That's not your fault." "No," Jimin whispered. "I was afraid." The admission hung heavy in the room. Jungkook frowned. "Afraid of what?" Jimin hesitated, then looked him dead in the eyes. "Of being better." Jungkook's brow furrowed. "That doesn't make sense." "It does to me," Jimin said. Every time I step out there, I feel like I'm pretending. Like the moment I shine too bright, someone will come along and snuff it out. He stood suddenly, pacing, restless. Andre didn't push me because I was in his way. He pushed me because he saw something in me he wanted to destroy. And deep down I let him. Jungkook stood too, anger flaring. That's bullshit, Jimin. You didn't let him. He did that because he's insecure and scared of you. But I am too. Jimin exploded. Scared of what it means to want to win. To outshine even the people I care about. Jungkook's mouth opened, then closed. I saw the way you looked at me after I fell, Jimin said. Like you wanted to break the whole world for me. Because I did, Jungkook snapped. There was a beat of silence, then a, why? Jimin asked. Why do you care so much? And there it was. The question. The one Jungkook had buried for years under layers of friendship, loyalty, duty, brotherhood. The one he never dared answer. Jungkook stepped closer. His jaw tensed. His fists clenched at his sides. I care, he said slowly, because when you fall, I feel like I'm falling too. And when you shine, I forget every darkness I've ever known. Jimin stared at him, wide-eyed. I care because I love you, Jungkook said. The words fell like thunder. Jimin took a shaky breath. You, what? I've loved you, Jungkook said, stepping even closer since the first time you took my hand in rehearsal and smiled like we were already on stage. The room spun around Jimin. His ribs ached, but not from the fall. Something inside him cracked open. Then why didn't you ever? Because I was afraid you didn't feel the same, Jungkook whispered. And because I didn't want to break what we already had. Jimin's face crumpled. You idiot. And then, without warning, Jimin pulled him in, arms around his waist, head buried in his chest. You should have said something, Jimin whispered. I just did, Jungkook said, holding him tightly. But even in that moment of shared truth, the storm outside grew louder, and the tension in the group outside their small bubble was building. The next morning, news had already spread. Andre was trending on social media, not for his dancing, but for being humiliated by Jungkook in front of the elite crew. It wasn't a coincidence that someone had leaked the rehearsal video. The camera angle was too clean, too centered. By noon, a formal investigation had been launched by the production team. Someone's trying to set you up, Namjoon said, arms crossed in the manager's office. They're making it look like you orchestrated this to gain sympathy before the finals. Jungkook sat rigid, jaw clenched. It's bullshit. Doesn't matter, Namjoon said. The court of public opinion doesn't wait for facts. Jimin was pacing. We have to find out who leaked it. Someone from inside. It wasn't me, said Taehyung from the corner, his voice thick. But I think I know who it was. Everyone turned. Mincio, he said. Andre's roommate. He was filming that night for behind-the-scenes content. Find him, Jungkook said. Now. The confrontation came fast and hard. Mincio didn't even deny it. People wanted drama, he said with a shrug. Now they've got it. You could ruin careers, Jimin hissed. You could have ruined his. Mincio's smirk didn't waver. It's not my fault if the truth hurts. Jungkook stepped forward, eyes burning. You think you've seen what I'm capable of? You've seen nothing. Mincio swallowed, stepping back. Namjoon raised a hand. Enough. We go through the proper channels. But the damage had been done. Jungkook's reputation was on the line. The media was spinning it as a calculated move, violence on camera, emotion on display, a romantic confession in the air. Headlines ranged from Golden Boy Goes Rogue to Lover's Duel on the dance floor. Even their fans were divided. Jimin received messages, some calling him brave, others blaming him for dragging Jungkook into this mess. Late that night, they sat on the roof, staring at the city lights below. I never wanted this, Jimin whispered. Jungkook shook his head. Neither did I. But we don't run from the fire, remember? We danced through it, Jimin said, smiling faintly. Jungkook looked at him, something fierce and warm in his eyes. Then let's burn. But neither of them could see the shadow watching from the stairwell, someone who had more to lose than anyone. Someone who knew what the next leak would be. And it wouldn't just be about dancing. You think it's over? The words came like a dagger in the silence of the green room. Jungkook turned slowly, his knuckles still raw from punching the studio wall hours earlier. The reflection in the mirror showed his eyes, bloodshot, rimmed with fury, sleeplessness, and something deeper. No, he said. It's just beginning. The TV behind him was muted, but he didn't need the sound to know what it said. The footage had gone viral again. This time, not of Andre shoving Jimin, but of something else entirely. A hallway. A moment. A kiss. Their kiss. Blurred, but unmistakable. Someone had captured it the night before. The camera had been distant, like a ghost watching from behind the air ducts above the practice floor. It wasn't just invasion of privacy. It was an ambush. Jimin stood near the door, shoulders stiff, jaw trembling. He hadn't spoken much since the leak. Every time he opened his mouth, the words curled back in on themselves like smoke. Who the hell would even, he started, then broke off, voice cracking. Jungkook crossed the room, slow and sure, grabbing Jimin's hands. His voice was low but laced with heat. They're trying to break us, he said. That's what this is. Not just sabotage. Assassination. Jimin's eyes darted toward the windows like the cameras were hiding even now. Why go this far? Who gains from this? Jungkook looked away, teeth grinding. People who see love as a liability. People who don't want two idols getting too powerful, too human. The room buzzed as the door burst open. Namjoon entered, face pale, phone in hand. There's more, he said. A third leak is scheduled to drop tonight. Anonymous user. Encrypted post. Jimin's breath hitched. What is it? Namjoon hesitated. Private messages. Yours. Between you and Yoongi. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. What kind of messages? Namjoon sat heavily in a chair, scrolling. Emotional ones. From when you two were on tour 3 years ago. About mental health. About anxiety. About hiding. Jimin's knees buckled. He fell into the nearest chair. How the hell did they get that? It doesn't matter how, Namjoon snapped. It matters why. This isn't about one rivalry. It's about systemic silencing. Someone wants to make an example of you. You came out swinging and now they're swinging back with teeth. The group was silent. Then Taehyung entered. Quietly. Eyes lowered. And Jungkook froze. Where were you last night? He asked. Taehyung didn't answer. Don't make me ask twice. I was in the tech booth, Taehyung said finally. I was downloading rehearsal footage for the showcase montage. And I saw the kiss. But I didn't leak it. I swear I didn't. Jimin looked up. But you saw it. Taehyung nodded slowly. Then who did you give it to? Jungkook asked. I didn't give it, Taehyung said. But someone copied it. I left the booth for maybe 2 minutes. When I came back, the drive had been accessed. Who else was there? Taehyung's jaw twitched. Yuna. The name hit the air like glass shattering. Yuna was one of the top producers. Charming. Calculating. Known for her sharp instincts and even sharper vendettas. She didn't believe in accidents. She believed in outcomes. Jimin stood slowly. She always hated me. She hated us, Jungkook corrected. Namjoon sighed. She wanted to push a new storyline. A rivalry between Jungkook and Andre. It sells. Conflict always sells. 2 alpha males battling it out on stage. But this. He gestured toward the screen. This ruined that narrative. Because it wasn't rivalry, Jimin whispered. It was intimacy. Namjoon nodded. Now she's rewriting the whole damn story. Silence stretched until it snapped. Jungkook's voice was steel. We take it back. Namjoon looked at him. Take what back? The story. The narrative. We tell our version. On our terms. Before they use our truth against us. Jimin stared. You want to go public? Jungkook looked at him with fire in his eyes. I want to go louder than they ever imagined. The plan was insane. They booked a live stream. Not through the label. Not through any network. Independent. Raw. Real. The hours leading up to it were tense. The studio had become a war room. Phones buzzed. Legal teams begged them to reconsider. Brand sponsors threatened to pull out. But neither Jungkook nor Jimin flinched. As the clock hit 8 p.m., the stream went live. Over 2 million viewers joined in the first 3 minutes. Jungkook sat beside Jimin on a black leather couch. No makeup. No script. Just 2 men facing the world. Jungkook spoke first. There's been a lot of noise. A lot of stories about what happened in the studio. What happened between me and Jimin. What happened on and off the dance floor. He looked into the camera like it was a person he loved and feared at once. We're not going to deny it. Yes, we kissed. Yes, I stood up for him when someone crossed the line. Yes, we care about each other in a way that doesn't fit your headlines. Jimin's hand slid into his. But what matters more than what you saw, Jimin said, voice clear, is what you didn't see. The years of pressure. The silence we were forced to keep. The pain of hiding who we are, not just from you, but from ourselves. Jungkook squeezed his hand. We're not here to scandalize you. We're here because we're tired of being used. Of being twisted into something we're not. And if we fall for this? Jimin said, eyes shining. Then let us fall together. The screen went black. The world imploded. For the next 24 hours, the internet was a wildfire. Support flooded in from fans, from fellow idols, from people who had longed for authenticity in an industry that fed on illusion. But so did the hate. Calls for contract termination. Boycotts. Backlash from traditionalists and corporate heads. And in the middle of it all, one final message came. An email. From a blocked address. Subject line, you think this is the END? Attached was a single image. A security camera still. Jungkook. Late at night. Standing alone in Yuna's office. His hand on a USB stick. Timestamp, 2 weeks ago. And a note, careful who you burn, golden boy. You've got secrets too. Jungkook stared at the screen. Then closed the laptop. And whispered, so that's how they want to play. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The image on the laptop screen lingered long after the device went dark. Jungkook's hand hovered above it, his fingers trembling not from fear, but from fury. He had seen this kind of tactic before. Manufactured truth. Staged optics. A weaponized moment of ambiguity. The office was quiet, dimly lit by the dying glow of the screen. Outside, the city's neon heart pulsed through the blinds, but in here, it felt like a vacuum, like even the air had been stripped of warmth. Jimin stood by the window, arms crossed tightly, his body language unreadable. He had said nothing since the image was shown to them. Not one word. Finally, Jungkook broke the silence. That's not what it looks like. Jimin didn't move. Didn't even blink. It's not, Jungkook said again, louder now. That night I was looking for evidence. I knew Yuna had access to private files and I thought. You thought breaking into her office alone, behind my back, was the right move? Jimin's voice cut like a blade, controlled, cold, and devastating. Jungkook stood, the chair scraping against the floor. I was trying to protect us. Jimin turned sharply, his eyes burning. By making yourself look guilty of exactly what they want to accuse us of? You know how this works. A picture is enough. A whisper is enough. Jungkook paced, his hands flying through his hair. I didn't think they'd catch it. The cameras shouldn't have even been active. I disabled them. Clearly you didn't. The words hit harder than they should have, and Jungkook froze. Jimin looked at him like he didn't recognize the person standing in front of him. Like the man who had defended him on stage, who had kissed him under the studio lights, had morphed into something else entirely. I don't know who I'm supposed to trust anymore, Jimin whispered. Jungkook's face twisted. Don't say that. Not to me. You're hiding things, Jungkook. Things that affect both of us. Jungkook turned to him, his voice hoarse. If I told you, you would have tried to stop me. I should have, Jimin snapped. Because now they've got you exactly where they want you, painted as the mastermind of the leaks. The lover. The traitor. The villain. Jungkook's mouth opened, but no words came. And Jimin walked out. The door slammed behind him. The next morning, the media exploded again. Breaking. Leaked photo shows Jungkook alone in producer's office prior to viral video release. Coincidence or conspiracy? #sword. Videos dissecting the image appeared across every platform. Analysts speculated. Fans panicked. Others turned. Inside the studio, chaos reigned. Yuna had gone silent, she wasn't answering calls, hadn't shown up for work, and the building was swarming with new security protocols. Management began conducting interviews under the guise of damage control, but the tension in the air was heavier than ever. Andre, now emboldened by the chaos, prowled the hallways like a vulture. He passed Jungkook near the soundstage, leaned in, and whispered with venom-laced pleasure. Told you they'd eat you alive? Jungkook shoved him against the wall. People screamed. Namjoon intervened before fists could fly. Cool your goddamn blood, both of you, Namjoon growled. But it was too late. Someone had recorded it. Again. The video hit the internet before the hour ended. Jungkook, unhinged. Violent. Dangerous. Another carefully crafted narrative. Another nail in the coffin. By the end of the week, Jungkook was suspended from rehearsals pending internal review. Jimin continued training alone. Their choreography was rewritten, his solo expanded. It was supposed to be a temporary fix. But everyone knew the truth. They were preparing for the possibility that Jungkook wouldn't return. At night, Jungkook roamed the city. He wore a hoodie and mask, moving like a shadow through the places that used to mean something. An empty practice room. A ramen shop where they once celebrated a win. A bridge they used to walk when the weight of fame became too much. He stopped there now, leaning over the rail, watching the water churn beneath him. The sky above was cloudless, but Jungkook felt the storm inside him clawing its way out. A voice pulled him from his thoughts. You look like you're trying to disappear. It was Yoongi. Jungkook didn't turn. Maybe I am. Yoongi stepped beside him. Don't. They'd win. Jungkook finally looked at him. They already are. Yoongi handed him a flash drive. Not if you use this. Jungkook stared. What is it? Insurance, Yoongi said. Yuna's full access logs. Security override timestamps. She was in her office 30 minutes after your visit. The night the leak happened. The footage was edited. Jungkook's hands closed around the drive. Yoongi lit a cigarette, took a drag, exhaled. They want a villain, Jungkook. So give them one, but on your terms. Rewrite the script. Jungkook stared at the water, his grip tightening. I'm tired of being used. Then stop letting them. Back at the dorm, Jungkook found Jimin asleep on the couch, surrounded by empty takeout boxes and unopened fan letters. His body was curled tight, like he was bracing for impact even in sleep. Jungkook knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. I never meant to hurt you, he whispered. Jimin stirred, eyes fluttering open. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jimin sat up slowly. You still have the drive? He asked. Jungkook nodded. Then let's finish this, Jimin said. They returned to the studio like ghosts. The staff whispered, parted like waves, unsure whether to bow or bolt. Jungkook walked straight into the media room, plugged the flash drive into the master console, and uploaded everything. Uncut. Unfiltered. The feed streamed live to their fan channel. No press release. No handlers. Just truth. Yuna's security logs. The real camera footage edited out, timestamps restored. And a final recorded message from Jungkook himself. This industry thinks it owns us. Thinks it can sell our stories, our love, our pain like product. But we're not merchandise. We're not puppets. We're human. And we're not ashamed of that anymore. The stream ended. The internet broke. But something unexpected happened. Support doubled. Sponsors reversed course. Even management, now facing their own reckoning, issued a statement of unconditional support and systemic review. Yuna was terminated. Quietly. But thoroughly. And Jungkook was reinstated. But none of that mattered as much as the moment Jimin walked into the rehearsal room, stood in front of Jungkook and said, Next time you break into an office for me, bring snacks. Jungkook laughed, and it sounded like a man breathing for the first time in weeks. He held out his hand. Jimin took it. They danced. And this time it wasn't for the cameras. Not for the fans. Not even for the industry. It was for them. For the pain. For the fire. For the love that refused to die. The air inside the arena pulsed like a heartbeat, loud, rhythmic, unrelenting. Backstage, beneath layers of steel scaffolding and LED lighting rigs, the tension was so thick you could taste it. Bitter. Metallic. Like adrenaline before a storm. Jungkook leaned against the cold concrete wall of the dressing area, his eyes closed, earbuds in, blocking out the chaos for just a second more. The crowd above them was chanting his name, their voices blurred into a distant roar. He should have felt invincible. But all he felt was raw. Frayed. Stripped bare. Jimin was behind him. He didn't say anything. Just stood there, close enough that Jungkook could feel the heat of his body. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was coiled, charged, like the space between lightning and thunder. Then came the voice in the intercom. 5 minutes to live. Jungkook opened his eyes. You ready? Jimin asked, his voice quiet but steady. No, Jungkook said. But let's do it anyway. The moment they stepped onto the platform, the world snapped into motion. Lights blazed. Smoke curled. The opening beat exploded through the arena like a gunshot. They moved in unison. Sharp. Ferocious. Beautiful. Jimin's body arched with control, his eyes burning. Jungkook matched him beat for beat, every step a dare, every breath a battle cry. The crowd went silent at one point, not from boredom, but from disbelief. Because it wasn't just dancing anymore. It was war. It was confession. And it was love, naked and unapologetic. When the final beat hit, Jimin turned, face flushed, lips parted, and Jungkook caught him, one hand behind his head, and they froze, breathless, inches apart, the echo of their pulse louder than the applause that erupted. Then they stepped back. The lights died. The show was over. But the aftermath had just begun. Backstage erupted. Phones buzzed nonstop. Hashtags trended worldwide. Videos circulated within minutes, slowed down, dissected frame by frame. Commentators speculated on whether the almost kiss was choreographed or spontaneous. Spoiler, it wasn't choreographed. Their manager, Sunwoo, cornered them in the hallway with sweat on his temples and a trembling hand gripping his clipboard. What the hell was that? He hissed. Do you have any idea what you've just done? We performed, Jungkook said flatly. No, you declared war. On corporate, on branding, on the image the agency has spent years building around you. Then maybe it was time to tear that image down, Jimin replied, stepping forward, his voice razor sharp. Sunwoo's face reddened. There's a board meeting in the morning. The directors are calling it a breach of contract. You'll both be there. Good, Jungkook said. I have a few things to say. Sunwoo looked like he wanted to scream, but he stormed off instead, slamming the door behind him. Jimin let out a breath and leaned against the wall, his body still buzzing from the performance. Jungkook stepped beside him, close but not touching. They're going to try to punish us, Jimin said quietly. Then we make it impossible to ignore us. How? We become too powerful to silence. Jimin looked at him, eyes wide. That's dangerous. So is pretending. The boardroom was colder than usual. 12 executives sat behind a long glass table, each of them pristine, polished, and perfectly still. In the center sat CEO Min Haejin, her fingers steepled in front of her, eyes sharp enough to cut bone. Jungkook and Jimin were seated side by side across from them. Namjoon stood at the back, arms folded, radiating quiet rage. We appreciate artistic freedom, Min Haejin began. But what happened last night was a calculated act of defiance. Do you deny that? No, Jungkook answered. I confirm it. A murmur spread down the table. We gave you the world, one director snapped. And you repay us with this? You gave us a stage, Jimin said coolly. We brought the world to it. Another executive leaned forward. Your behavior is a liability. You're alienating sponsors, parents, cultural purists. Jungkook tilted his head. If they're offended by two people telling the truth through dance, maybe they shouldn't be in the business of entertainment. Min Haejin held up a hand to silence the bickering. So what exactly do you want? Jimin and Jungkook exchanged a glance. Control, Jungkook said. Of our story. Of our image. No more filtered statements. No more branding decisions made without us. We decide who we are. A silence followed so complete that even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. Then Min Haejin smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't reassuring. It was the smile of someone planning their next move. We'll consider it, she said. But until then we expect complete silence from both of you. No interviews. No posts. No public statements. Jimin bristled. So you want us quiet while you weaponize the noise? Exactly. Jungkook's voice dropped, dangerous and calm. We're not yours to silence anymore. They stood and walked out. The silence didn't last. That night, someone uploaded unreleased footage from a rehearsal 6 months ago. It showed Jungkook screaming at one of the stage managers. Another leak. Another scandal. The caption read, unstable, unprofessional, unfit for leadership. Within hours, news outlets picked it up. Op-eds questioned his emotional volatility. Fans were split. Jimin threw his phone across the room when he saw it. This isn't going to stop, he said. They're going to dig until there's nothing left to bury. Jungkook sat on the bed, silent. Do you regret it? Jimin asked suddenly. Jungkook looked up. What? All of this? The performance. Telling the truth. No, Jungkook's answer was immediate, fierce. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. Jimin's eyes softened. Then he moved, crossing the room, kneeling in front of Jungkook, taking his face in his hands. Then let's keep going, he whispered. Even if they burn us to the ground. Jungkook leaned into him. Let them try. The next morning, everything changed. An anonymous whistleblower came forward. An email sent to multiple news outlets. Subject line, the real scandal. Attached were hundreds of internal documents, showing how the agency had manipulated press releases, staged rivalries, and pressured artists into silence about identity, mental health, and relationships. Yuna wasn't the only one. She was part of a system. The industry convulsed. Investigations were launched. Artists began speaking out. And for the first time in years, there was a crack in the wall. Jungkook and Jimin sat together on a rooftop, watching the sunrise bleed across the sky like a wound healing in reverse. This isn't just about us anymore, Jimin said. No, Jungkook replied. It never was. They clasped hands. Not for show, not for rebellion, but for truth. And in the distance, the city began to stir. Awakening not to a scandal, but to a revolution. The first time Jungkook stepped into the studio after the leak, the floorboards felt different beneath his shoes. Like they knew. The mirrors didn't reflect just his face anymore. They reflected consequences and history, and the edges of a war that wasn't over, only paused. Just long enough for someone to reload. He stretched in silence, shoulders wound tight with exhaustion and something sharper. Resolve. Outside, the world was shifting. Protests were forming outside agency buildings. Signs reading "Let them speak and art isn't obedience." Messages poured in. Artists from other agencies started speaking anonymously, then not so anonymously. Interviews surfaced from former staff, from extranees, from backroom assistants who had seen too much and been paid too little to stay quiet. The industry was cracking, not shattering yet, but groaning under the weight of its own deception. Still, the silence from HYX, the agency, was calculated and cold. No apologies, no admissions, just silence and the slow drowning of their own stars. Jungkook tightened the laces of his sneakers. The showcase was still scheduled. They hadn't pulled it, which meant someone, somewhere, was betting that the world would forget in time, that a good enough performance could drown scandal. He wasn't going to let that happen. The door behind him opened. Jimin. His silhouette against the hallway light was familiar and yet different. His shoulders had changed, somehow. Not in size but in burden. He looked like someone who had chosen a side in a war that might cost him everything. Jungkook said nothing. He didn't need to. Jimin came to stand beside him, eyes on the mirror. He was holding something. A folded piece of paper. He handed it to Jungkook wordlessly. Jungkook unfolded it slowly. A legal contract. Termination clause. It was unsigned. They gave me an out, Jimin said softly. Quiet exit. No press. Full compensation package. Gag clause for 5 years. Jungkook's jaw clenched. They're trying to erase you. They're trying to make it look like I walked away. That we broke because I couldn't handle it. Are you going to sign it? Jimin looked at him then. Really looked. Do you think I should? Jungkook didn't answer. He stepped closer instead, until there was barely space between them. I think if you leave, he said quietly, you'll never forgive yourself. Jimin's breath hitched. I'm tired, Jungkook. They're turning fans against us. My family's getting threats. My brother's address was posted online. I know, Jungkook whispered. I know. He reached out, slid his hand to the back of Jimin's neck. Not to pull him in, but to steady him, anchor him. We finish this, Jungkook said. We go on that stage and we remind them why they loved us in the first place. Not the image. You and me. Jimin's eyes fluttered shut. When he opened them, there was no doubt left. Then let's make sure they remember. The final showcase wasn't a concert. It was a battlefield. It was where careers were made permanent, or buried under applause that came too late. The arena was sold out. Over 100,000 watching live online. Sponsors watching closely. Executives in the VIP box with stiff suits and tighter expressions. The rest of the dance teams had been told, quietly, to keep it clean. And then there was Andre. He watched from the wings like a predator. Since the leaks, he'd gone quiet, but not because he'd backed off. Because he was waiting. He was betting on scandal fatigue. On the audience's need for neatness. Order. He approached Jimin backstage an hour before the performance. His voice low, slick with false sympathy. You know you don't have to do this, he said. You could walk away, save face. Let him burn alone. Jimin looked at him like he was a stain he'd just noticed on his sleeve. You're not half the villain you think you are, Jimin replied. But you're exactly the coward. Andre's jaw twitched. You think the crowd's with you? Wait until you hear them turn. Jimin didn't flinch. I'd rather be hated for being honest than loved for being something I'm not. Andre laughed. We'll see. The lights went out. A single piano note cut through the dark. The crowd quieted. Jungkook walked onto the stage first. No graphics. No intro. Just him. He stood center, breathing in the silence, and then moved, slowly, with intention, each movement a declaration. There was no music yet. Just the sound of his breath, the crackle of the stage under his feet. Then Jimin appeared. They danced. Not side by side, but together. The choreography wasn't clean. It was raw, intimate, bruised and beautiful. They didn't mask their pain, they wielded it. Each lift was a trust fall. Each glance a conversation. When Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand in the final moment, Jimin hesitated, just enough for the audience to feel it. Then took it. The silence after was louder than applause. And then the stadium erupted. Not a roar, a wave, a scream, a sob. The fans weren't just reacting, they were releasing. The anger, the confusion, the betrayal, the relief. They saw the truth in sweat and trembling muscles and locked eyes and open hands. And it shattered the narrative. Later, backstage, they sat in silence again. The storm had passed, but the sky was still black. Jimin leaned back against the wall, eyes closed. Jungkook sat beside him, drained. The door opened. Namjoon stepped in, his face unreadable. "You should both see this," he said, holding up his phone. They watched. A message. From the agency. Public. Official. HYX formally apologizes to Jungkook and Jimin for its mishandling of recent events. We recognize our failure to support our artists. Effective immediately, creative control over their future projects will rest in their hands. We commit to systemic change. Starting now. Jungkook blinked. Jimin's breath caught. Namjoon smiled, faint and tired. "You just burned the system down," he said. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin laughed. Quietly, joylessly, like he didn't believe it. And then he cried. Not because they won, but because they survived. And Jungkook held him. There on the floor of a dim backstage room. Not as an idol, not as a fighter, not even as a performer, but as someone who finally, didn't have to hide anymore. And the world kept watching. It had been 6 days since the showcase. 6 days since the world changed. The official apology from HYX had made headlines worldwide. Entertainment outlets called it historic, while industry insiders called it a calculated pivot. But the public didn't care about the politics. What they remembered was the performance, the emotion, the unbearable honesty of it. Jungkook and Jimin hadn't left their shared apartment since. Not because they were afraid, because they needed silence. No interviews, no rehearsals, no cameras, just sleep, touch, quiet meals, the rare moments of stillness between the aftershocks. But the world never really sleeps and it doesn't forget. Not when it smells blood. A knock came at the door. It was Namjoon. He didn't wait for an invitation before stepping inside. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. Jungkook stood from the kitchen counter. "What is it?" Namjoon didn't speak. He just handed over a folder. Thick, confidential. Inside were photos, reports, documents stamped with the agency's internal logo. Jimin came up behind Jungkook, looking over his shoulder. He froze, because in one of the photos, grainy security footage blown up for clarity was Jungkook. But not just him. It was from 3 years ago, a hotel in Osaka. The night he disappeared from the group for 24 hours. A night no one had ever asked him about. Not really, because the official story was that he'd been overwhelmed, taken a break, needed space. But the image told a different story. He wasn't alone. He was with a man. Unknown face. Foreign. Private elevator. No record in official logs. Jimin's voice was a whisper. "Who is that?" Jungkook didn't answer. Namjoon stepped closer. "They're saying you were paid. That you sold unreleased tracks. Staged a fake burnout to hide the transfer. HYX buried it to protect the group." Jimin stepped back. The silence was so loud. It burned. "Tell me it's not true," Jimin said. "Please." Jungkook shut the folder. "It's not that simple. You lied to us?" "I didn't take money," Jungkook snapped. "But I was going to leave. That night I told HYX I was done. I met with someone from another agency. They promised me full creative control. Freedom. I was going to walk away." Jimin stared. "Why didn't you?" Jungkook swallowed. "Because of you." Jimin's expression cracked. "I watched one of our rehearsal videos," Jungkook said. "Just one. You were smiling. You didn't know the camera was on you. And I thought, if I leave, I'll never see that again." Jimin turned away. "Don't walk away from me now," Jungkook said. "Please." "I made a choice. I stayed. I buried it. Not because I wanted to lie. Because I thought it was over." "But they didn't forget," Namjoon said. "And now they're using it to remind you who's really in control." The folder fell to the floor. No one picked it up. The press got wind of it by morning. Jungkook trended for all the wrong reasons again. #TraitorKook. Hashtag burnout lie. Hashtag double-face idol. Fanbases clashed. Agencies started pulling offers. A planned collaboration was abruptly postponed indefinitely. A cosmetics brand released a vague statement about reevaluating partnerships based on alignment with core values. Jimin didn't leave the bedroom for 2 days. Jungkook didn't sleep. On the third day, Jimin emerged. He looked at Jungkook across the table. I can't defend something I don't understand. Jungkook nodded. I'll explain it all. Every part. Now. And he did. Every call he made. Every message. The meetings. The moment he bought a one-way ticket and canceled it at the gate. The way HYX found out and didn't fire him, but kept it in their vault like a gun loaded and waiting. Jimin listened. Not interrupting. Not forgiving. But hearing. When Jungkook finished, the silence was suffocating. Then Jimin whispered, "You almost walked away from me without a word. I was a coward. You still are. I'm still here." Jimin looked at him. Barely. A week later, the board summoned them again. This time the room was darker. Tense. No pretense of politeness. Min Haejin's expression was unreadable. "We've handled the current scandal with minimal reputational damage," she said. "But we need to ensure there are no further missteps." "What do you want?" Jungkook asked. "A public confession," Min Haejin said. "Framed as youthful misjudgment. A lapse. You express regret. Remind the public why they loved you. Appeal to forgiveness." "No. It's not a request." "Then it's a mistake." Min Haejin stood. "You think we gave you freedom? That apology? It was transactional. You bought a moment of peace with silence. But you forgot who owns the air you breathe." Jungkook's voice was low. "I don't belong to anyone." Jimin stepped forward. "Neither do I." "You'll regret this," Min Haejin said. "We can bury you with a whisper." "Then scream," Jimin said. "Because I won't be afraid anymore." The video dropped that night. Not from HYX. From Jungkook and Jimin. Another live stream. No warning. This time it was a confession. But not the kind they were asked for. Jungkook spoke first. "I've made mistakes. I've wanted to run. I've hidden parts of myself because I was scared of losing what I love." He looked at Jimin. "But I didn't run. Because I couldn't leave without fighting for him." Jimin took his hand. "And I didn't stay quiet," Jimin said. "Because I didn't want to be complicit anymore. We are not perfect. We are not innocent. But we are real." They didn't ask for forgiveness. They demanded space. To grow. To be flawed. To change. To breathe. And when the stream ended, the world didn't fall apart. It listened. Not everyone clapped. Not everyone forgave. But they listened. And for the first time in months, that was enough. Jungkook sat on the floor, his back against the wall, fingers interlaced with Jimin's. No stage. No music. Just them. Still burning. Still here. And in the distance, the echo of a system cracking again. The morning was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that settles before something breaks. Jungkook sat at the window of their apartment. The city stretched wide before him like a stage no one wanted to perform on anymore. A gray curtain of smog rolled low across the skyline. His phone was on the table next to a mug of untouched coffee, vibrating every few seconds with another notification, another reaction, another demand for a response. He didn't touch it. Jimin sat on the floor behind him, his back against the wall, legs folded to his chest, wearing the same sweatshirt he'd slept in. His eyes weren't focused. They weren't reading or watching anything. He was just existing, waiting, like his body hadn't caught up with everything they'd just done. The live stream had changed the story. Again, some fans rallied harder than ever. Others left entirely. One prominent agency head, anonymous, but clearly threatened, told an entertainment blog that this level of recklessness from idols was the beginning of the collapse of idol culture. HYX issued a statement just minutes before midnight. They called the stream unauthorized. They called the messages personal views not aligned with the agency. They called Jimin and Jungkook under internal review. It was a warning, thinly veiled, but no less dangerous. And then came the text. Yoongi. One line. There's a board vote coming. You're not going to like what they're voting on. Jungkook didn't breathe for a moment, then finally reached for his phone and called him. Yoongi answered on the second ring. It's worse than we thought, he said. What are they voting on? Jungkook asked, already knowing. Yoongi hesitated. Then, your removal from active status. Indefinitely. All public appearances. Rehearsals. Contracts. Studio access. They're calling it a suspension, but it's exile. Jungkook turned to Jimin. Met his eyes. And me. Yoongi paused again. They're splitting you too. They're offering Jimin a solo rebrand. Complete support. Global focus. But only if he walks away from you publicly. Jimin stood slowly. Jungkook's stomach twisted. You already knew, didn't you? Jimin nodded, slowly. They called me last night. You didn't tell me. I didn't know how. Jungkook moved across the room. So what are you going to do? Don't ask me that. I need to know. I don't know, Jungkook. Jimin snapped. Because I'm trying to figure out if there's a version of this where we both survive. Jungkook's jaw tensed. There isn't. Not if we play by their rules. Silence stretched between them. Thick. Suffocating. Jimin rubbed his face with both hands. I spent half my life building this dream. I sacrificed everything for it. My privacy. My childhood. My identity. And now it comes down to this? Choose you or lose everything. I didn't ask you to choose. You didn't have to. Jimin shouted. Because you already chose. You threw the first punch. You leaked the video. You made the speech. You burned the bridge before I could even reach it. Jungkook blinked, stunned. You think I did this to ruin you? I think you didn't care who you hurt as long as you were free. Jungkook turned away. That's not fair. I don't care if it's fair, Jimin whispered. I care if it's true. Yoongi's voice came through the phone, still in Jungkook's hand. You have 48 hours before the board votes. After that, there's no undoing what they decide. Jungkook ended the call. Neither of them spoke for a long time. 48 hours. The time passed like blood seeping from a wound, slow, but steady. Namjoon came to see them that evening. He didn't bring advice or strategy. He brought silence. He sat on the floor between them, leaned his head back against the wall, and closed his eyes. This place isn't big enough for what you're holding inside, he finally said. No place is, Jimin replied. Namjoon looked at Jungkook. They think they can break you two apart. Not because they hate you, but because you scare them. You're bigger than their system now. Jungkook shook his head. That doesn't make this easier. No, Namjoon agreed. But it means you're doing something right. The morning of the vote, Jimin left before Jungkook woke. He didn't leave a note. Jungkook sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, thinking, waiting, not for Jimin to come back, but for the answer. It never came. At noon, he went to the agency building. Security didn't stop him, but they didn't smile either. He walked the halls like a ghost. People looked away. Others stared. He passed rooms he'd danced in since he was 17. Rooms where they'd laughed, cried, fought, bled. Rooms that now belonged to a version of him the company wanted erased. At the end of the corridor was the boardroom. Inside were 12 people who believed they had the right to decide who he was. Min Haejin stood when he entered. Mr. Jeon, she said. You are not required to speak. I'm aware. He walked to the center of the room. I'm not going to beg. I'm not going to defend myself. You've already made up your minds. Min Haejin opened a folder. Do you wish to acknowledge the misconduct presented in the report? No. Do you accept the board's authority to suspend your activities for the duration of the fiscal cycle? Jungkook looked around the room. No. There was a rustle. Murmurs. A shifting of power. Then what are you doing here? To say this, Jungkook said. You can exile me. Strip me of everything. But you will never silence me again. I am not afraid of you. And neither is he. The door opened. Jimin walked in. Straight. Silent. Fierce. He walked to Jungkook's side. The room froze. I turned down your offer, Jimin said. The solo deal. The rebrand. The future without him. I don't want a future that costs me my soul. Min Haejin's eyes narrowed. You understand what this means? Jimin nodded. It means I finally get to be free. They walked out together. No applause. No red carpet. No fanfare. Just freedom. And behind them the agency trembled. Because for the first time in its history, the idols had walked away first. Together. The building behind them no longer held weight. Not the kind that mattered. Jungkook didn't turn around once. And neither did Jimin. They didn't need to. They'd left more than a company in that boardroom. They had walked away from years of branding, from contracts polished into golden cages, from carefully trimmed public narratives that never truly belonged to them. It was raining when they stepped out into the street. The soft kind. The kind that soaked into your shirt before you realized you were wet. Pedestrians looked up. Some recognized them. Some pulled out phones. Some just stared. But they didn't run. Jimin reached for Jungkook's hand and squeezed. Hard. As if anchoring himself to something real. And Jungkook squeezed back. They walked in silence for 2 blocks. Then 3. Then 7. The city blurred around them like a dream they hadn't asked to wake up from. By the time they stopped walking, it was in front of the old rehearsal studio where they trained as teenagers. The building was technically condemned. Scheduled for demolition. A banner across the chain-link fence announced a new luxury condominium project. But the studio lights inside were still on. Jungkook's brow furrowed. That's weird. Jimin stepped forward, peering through the gaps in the rusted fence. No one's supposed to be here. A voice called out from the side alley. Funny how the ghosts show up when you least expect them. It was Taehyung. He was holding an umbrella in one hand and a flash drive in the other. You two really couldn't wait to burn it all down, huh? He said. Jungkook's heart thumped, slow and hard. Why are you here? Same reason you are, Taehyung said. I wanted to see what was left. Jimin narrowed his eyes. Why do you have a drive? Taehyung smirked. Because I figured if you're gonna fight the system, you better know how deep the rot goes. Jungkook stared at him. What's on it? Taehyung's expression changed. He looked tired suddenly. Older. Everything, he said. Emails. Audio logs. Schedules. The truth about Yuna. The way she blackmailed other trainees. The way the board sanctioned it. Jimin stepped forward slowly. How long have you had this? Since before the first leak. Taehyung hesitated. I was going to use it, but I was scared. Scared of what? Of what it would turn me into, he said. Because once you stop playing their game, there's no way back. Jungkook held out his hand. Taehyung looked at him for a long time, then gave him the drive. Jimin took a slow breath. You know what this means, right? I do, Jungkook said. We go public. Fully. No filters. No edits. No backing down. You'll be blacklisted, Taehyung said. They'll shut every door you try to open. Then we'll build our own door, Jimin replied. Taehyung looked at them both, then smiled, sad and proud at once. I missed this, he said. The fire in you. The reason I started dancing in the first place. They didn't go home. They went to Yoongi's apartment. Yoongi let them in wordlessly, took one look at the flash drive, and without asking questions, booted up a laptop. For hours they sat in silence. Reading. Watching. Listening. They saw footage of auditions where trainees were ranked before they even danced, based on family money and political value. They heard recordings of Yuna threatening a 17-year-old trainee with deportation if he didn't fix his mannerisms. They read emails from board members mocking Jimin's emotional interviews, referring to him as a vulnerability asset and sympathy gold. Jungkook wanted to scream. Jimin just cried, softly, without drawing attention. Yoongi sat quietly, head bowed. When it was over, they looked at each other. And without speaking, they knew what came next. The next day, they sent the full drive to the press. No filters. No watermarks. No anonymous leaks. They sent it with their names. Jungkook. Jimin. taehyung, yoongi. Attached was a statement. Not a prepared one. Not PR slick. Just a letter. Honest. Shaky at the edges. It read, "We are not perfect, but we are no longer afraid to be real. The system that built us tried to own us. This is what they never wanted you to see. If we disappear after this, remember that it wasn't because we failed. It's because they silenced us. But truth has a way of living on. Even in exile." It broke the internet in under an hour. News anchors stumbled over legal terms. Former idols released reaction videos. International outlets picked it up as a landmark moment in entertainment accountability. But not everyone celebrated. Sponsors pulled out. Event organizers rescinded invitations. A fan base splintered overnight. Death threats returned. Accusations of betrayal echoed louder than before. The apartment became a bunker. Jimin stopped opening his phone. Jungkook stopped replying to anyone but Yoongi. They barely left the living room. Until the knock came at midnight. No one spoke at first. The sound was sharp, deliberate. Jungkook stood. Yoongi stepped between him and the door. Careful. Jungkook opened it anyway. It wasn't media. It wasn't an agency rep. It was Seekjin. His expression was unreadable. His coat soaked through from rain. "I came to say one thing," he said. "Then say it," Jungkook replied. "I didn't speak up when I should have. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Jimin stepped forward. Seekjin looked at him. "You were braver than I ever was. And you reminded me why we started this in the first place." He handed them a flash drive. Jungkook blinked. "Another one? Different company," Seekjin said. "Different crimes. Why us?" Seekjin smiled. "Because you're the only ones who aren't scared to use it." They created a website. Not flashy. Not monetized. A digital archive. They called it Unscripted. It became a hub. Other artists joined. Anonymous at first. Then not. Dancers. Trainees. Stylists. Former managers. Some idols with legacies. Some who had never debuted. Some who never would. Each uploaded their own stories. Their own evidence. It grew beyond them. Within weeks, there were protests outside multiple agencies. Then the government got involved. A task force was announced. Regulations introduced. New oversight boards formed. HYX released a statement 2 days later. Public apology. This time they named names. Yuna. The board. Specific policies. The rigged trainee systems. They offered Jungkook and Jimin reinstatement. Creative control. A full apology. A press conference to welcome them back. Jungkook laughed when he read it. Jimin deleted the email. They didn't want to go back. They were too busy building something new. Months passed. They didn't release music right away. They weren't ready. Instead, they danced. Online. For free. No choreography. No branding. Just raw movement. Captured in low light. In abandoned buildings and rooftop garages. It was imperfect. It was beautiful. And it was theirs. For the first time in years, they weren't someone else's story. They were writing their own. And the world, slowly, quietly, began to follow. It began with a question. Not from the press or the fans or the agencies still licking their wounds. It came from Jimin one night, seated on the floor of the loft they now called home. Half lived in, cluttered with open sketchbooks, old dance shoes, and half-eaten containers of kimchi stew. "Do you miss it?" Jungkook had just finished setting up a new speaker system, their first real purchase in months. He was still crouched beside it, wires looped around his wrist. He looked up, brows furrowed, not entirely sure what Jimin meant. "Do I miss what?" Jimin ran his fingers through his overgrown fringe, then looked straight at him. The stage, the screaming crowds, the tours, the old version of all of this, the machine we walked away from. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He stood instead, walking over slowly, sinking down across from him, knee brushing Jimin's. "I miss what it could have been," he finally said. "Not what it was." Jimin gave a quiet laugh. "That's such a Jungkook answer. What's that supposed to mean?" You always hold out hope. Even when you hate something, you see how it could be better. Jungkook smiled faintly. Hope is stubborn like that. There was a pause. Then Jimin leaned forward, voice dropping. What if we built it? A real stage. Our rules. Our space. Not just us, everyone. All the ones the industry used and left behind. What if we gave them a spotlight? Jungkook blinked. Like a tour. Jimin shook his head. Like a revolution. Physical. Tangible. Something they can't edit or erase. Jungkook's chest tightened. It wasn't just an idea. It was the idea. They didn't sleep that night. They pulled out notebooks, scribbled ideas on napkins, paced the living room until the sun rose. By the time the city stirred awake, they had a name. Untethered. Not a concert. Not a showcase. A movement. The news spread like wildfire. Jungkook and Jimin back on stage. Independently. No agency. No management. No label. Just a small team of trusted creators. Yoongi on sound. Taehyung as creative director. Seokjin overseeing logistics. They announced a multi-city event with no fixed format. Each performance would be shaped by its location, by the local dancers they collaborated with, by the story they felt needed to be told there. No choreographed perfection. No pre-recorded backing tracks. No gimmicks. Just art. The first venue was an old train depot in Busan. Rust-streaked pillars. Open roof. Graffiti-covered walls. They cleared it out themselves, lit it with borrowed rigging, promoted the event through underground networks and social media. They didn't even sell tickets. It was donation-based. Come as you are. Pay what you can. The crowd came anyway. Hundreds. Then thousands. Some brought flowers. Others brought handmade signs. A girl near the front wept the moment Jimin walked out. Her hand pressed to her chest like she was remembering how to breathe. Jungkook walked barefoot onto the cracked platform. The speakers hummed. A single violin loop began, imperfect, haunting. They danced. Not like idols. Not like fugitives. Like men who had finally taken their story back. The audience didn't scream. They watched. Silent. Reverent. Jimin ended the piece on his knees, face slick with sweat. Shaking. Jungkook stood behind him, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Then the lights cut out. The depot plunged into darkness. For a moment, there was only the sound of breathing. Then applause. Raw. Loud. Honest. It wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. And the truth was stunning. But truth has enemies. 3 performances in, they received a cease and desist letter from HYX. Not for performing. For using their own names. The letter claimed the names Jungkook and Jimin were intellectual properties under the agency's legal control. It was absurd. It was terrifying. They're trying to erase us, Jimin said, pacing the floor of their temporary housing in Gwangju. From our own names. They know they can't stop us, Jungkook said, voice low. So they're trying to turn the crowd against us. Make us look like we're still theirs. Yoongi stepped in, laptop in hand. They won't win. Not this time. He dropped a document onto the table. It was a legal precedent from a case 5 years ago. An artist who fought for her stage name and won. I talked to her, Yoongi said. She's willing to help. Plan formed. They went public again. A new video. Jungkook spoke first. You can take a name off a contract. But you can't take it out of someone's soul. Jimin followed. We're not reclaiming a brand. We're reclaiming our identities. You named us when we were young. We earned those names. They belong to us now. The hashtag trended globally in hours. Hashtag their names, they're right. Fans from around the world shared videos of what those names meant to them. Concert footage. Letters. Tattoos. Art. And then came the statement from the artist Yoongi had contacted. She stood on a small stage, mic in hand, and said, They taught us we were products. But we were people. It's time we acted like it. That night, the agency withdrew the lawsuit. Quietly, begrudgingly, and Untethered kept moving. They performed in Bangkok, in a drained swimming pool beneath the open sky. They performed in Berlin, on the steps of an abandoned opera house. They performed in New York, beneath the scaffolding of a half-finished building in Queens. Each performance was a whisper turned into a scream, and through it all their bond deepened. Not just as artists, as people, as lovers. There were fights. Nights where Jimin would sit alone in the dark, doubting everything. Mornings when Jungkook would walk alone before sunrise, unsure if they could keep going. But they always came back to each other. One night, after a performance in Kyoto, Jimin found Jungkook on the rooftop, looking at the city lights. "You okay?" he asked. Jungkook didn't answer right away. "I used to think the only way to be great was to be perfect. And now I think greatness is surviving." Jimin leaned into him. "Then we're already legends." Jungkook smiled, faint and tired. "You're the legend." Jimin kissed him, slow, deep, then whispered, "No, Jungkook, we are." And then came the final performance. Seoul. Not at a stadium, not in a theater. At the ruins of the first dance studio they ever trained in. The one they'd visited months ago. With the roof caved in and weeds growing through the floor. They set up mirrors where the old ones had shattered. Used bare bulbs strung across scaffolding. They called it homecoming. No tickets, no broadcast, just word of mouth. People came in droves. And when Jungkook stepped out onto that cracked floor, and Jimin walked beside him, hand in hand, heads held high, the crowd didn't cheer. They wept, because they weren't watching idols. They were watching two people who had lost everything to become free. They danced. For every silence they endured. For every word they were told not to say. For every person still trapped in a contract. For every dream nearly broken by the machine. They danced. And when it ended, they stood, sweating, shaking, unapologetically alive. And the crowd rose, not in noise, but in unity, hands raised, silent, together. And in that moment Jungkook knew, they had won. Not fame, not power, not even justice, something bigger. A world that finally saw them, and chose to listen, not because they were idols, but because they were human. You said, Lanjukin episode Selanjutnya Dengen episode Yang Lebi Panjang, Ten Ribu Kata Tau Lebi. Lebi Nayak Perkapan Panis, Seru Tegang, controversial, Kajutan dan emotional dan barakan saya narasi saja dalam basa, Inggris Tampa Mengunkan Poin dan Janagan Gunakan Sumber Dari Web. ChatGPT said, title, Jungkook's reaction when this guy pushed Jimin. Episode 11 The Ghost Contract. The echo of applause hadn't faded when the real war returned. After Seoul, everything changed again, only this time not because they performed, but because someone watching decided they shouldn't have. Came the next morning in the form of a knock. 3 times. Hard. Mechanical. No rhythm. No patience. Jungkook opened the door, still shirtless, hair tousled from a sleepless night, expecting a delivery or a fan who'd gotten too close. Instead, it was 2 men in dark suits. No smiles. No cameras. No introductions. One of them held up a document. The other held a voice recorder. "We're here on behalf of H-Line Global," the taller one said. Jungkook blinked. Who the hell is H-Line? The man didn't blink. The holding company that bought 51% of HYX last month. Jimin appeared behind him, towel over his shoulder. What's going on? The man handed Jungkook a file. Thick, stamped, legal. Inside were pages of print, bold headers, contract clauses. And there, buried 3 pages in, was the name Jeon Jungkook. And then, Park Jimin. Jungkook's mouth went dry. "Your names and likeness are now part of a corporate portfolio under H-Line," the man said. "You're in breach of a ghost clause." Jimin stepped forward, grabbing the document. "What the hell is a ghost clause?" The second man finally spoke, voice low, as if rehearsed. "It's a non-public clause embedded in older legacy contracts. Originally used for insurance, now used for control. It activates post-departure if the artist continues any public-facing media career within 2 years of exiting." Jungkook looked at him like he was out of his mind. "You're saying we're not allowed to exist? You're not allowed to perform? record. Appear under any name tied to your former brand. You mean our names? Jimin snapped. Our faces. Ourselves. The man didn't flinch. Those have become properties. Protected by acquisition law. Jungkook let out a laugh. No humor in it. We own nothing, do we? The man nodded toward the document. You have 30 days to cease all artistic activity, or you will be sued for breach. Up to $8 million in damages. Jimin stepped between them. Get out. They didn't move. I said get out, Jimin hissed. Something flickered in the taller man's eyes. Pity, maybe, or amusement. It was hard to tell. You think you started a fire, he said. But fires can be contained. And you're still standing inside the building. They left. Jungkook closed the door with shaking hands. Neither of them spoke. The apartment suddenly was too quiet again. Felt like drowning in a room with no water. Jimin sat on the couch, that old towel still slung over his shoulder. But now it felt like armor. We can't pay that, he whispered. No one can, Jungkook said. That's the point. They're trying to kill untethered. They're trying to kill us. Jungkook dropped the file on the floor, unable to look at it. Jimin stared at it like it might open its jaws and swallow them whole. They called Yoongi that afternoon. He answered on speaker, already out of breath like he'd just run through 5 conspiracy theories in his head. I know, he said. Jungkook blinked. You know? I heard rumblings last week. I just didn't want to believe it until I saw the paper. Jimin was pacing now, barefoot, furious. You didn't tell us. Yoongi didn't apologize. Because if I had, you wouldn't have stepped on that stage. And if you didn't do so, this clause never would have activated. So what now? Jungkook asked. We hide for 2 years? No, Yoongi said. We expose them. They own the paper. Then you expose the way the paper was written. Yoongi dropped the next bomb like he had been holding it in his chest for years. The clause was only legal because it was signed by guardians. You were minors when the original contract was signed. Remember? Jungkook went cold. My mother didn't sign anything about a ghost clause. That's the thing, Yoongi said. They added it later, during a restructuring. They used a forged supplemental approval form. Yours, Jimin's, Taehyung's, even mine. Silence. You're telling me they faked my mother's signature? Jimin asked, stunned. Faked it, Yoongi confirmed. Used it to legally enslave you past your contract. And now they're cashing in. Jungkook sat back down, head spinning. This isn't just unethical, he said. It's criminal. Yep, Yoongi said. And if you want out, you need to make the public care. How? Jimin asked. You go live. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin looked back. They both nodded. That night, the live stream was different. No art. No lighting. No music. Just 2 boys, seated on their floor, with papers and emails and an old video file queued up. They began with their story again, but this time they didn't romanticize it. They told people what the contract looked like. They showed the signature page. They showed the real signature, Jimin's mother's signature, from his childhood school documents. They didn't match. They showed side-by-sides. They played a recording of a phone call Yoongi had made, with a board member who, not realizing he was being recorded, admitted the ghost clause was standard exploitation. Jungkook stared into the camera. This is what power looks like. It hides behind paper, behind money, behind the illusion of opportunity. Jimin followed. This is not just about us. This is about every artist still trapped under someone else's name. They ended the stream with a message. We are not asking for forgiveness. We are demanding recognition. The feed went black, and the world erupted. #FreeTheStage trended across multiple platforms. Former idols shared their own documents, blurring names but confirming similar ghost clauses. One popular actor posted, "They own my smile. I've known it for years. No more silence." A news anchor broke protocol on air and said, "The industry must answer for this." Then came the letter from the National Creative Rights Council. An official investigation was being launched into fraudulent contract enforcement, and intellectual personhood violations. It was the beginning of something bigger than them. And yet, in their apartment, nothing had changed. The bills still piled. They couldn't perform, not until the investigation played out. Jimin started losing sleep again. He stared out windows like answers lived between buildings. Jungkook started writing music again. Quiet, melancholy tracks he never shared, just let echo into the dark like prayers. One morning, Jimin found a note on the table. It just said, "I'm going to Busan. I need to see the sea." Jimin followed the next day. He found Jungkook on a bench, staring out at the water. No cameras, no fans, just them. Jimin sat down beside him. "Are you okay?" Jungkook didn't look at him. "I feel like I'm made of glass, and everyone's waiting to see where I crack." Jimin took his hand. "Then let them see that you still stand even after shattering." Jungkook's throat tightened. Jimin whispered, "I'd rather be shattered beside you than whole and alone." The sea rolled on endlessly, and the sun began to rise again. Weeks passed. The investigation intensified. The lawsuits were filed. HYX's board was summoned to court. 2 members resigned. Yoona disappeared entirely. The clause was officially ruled unlawful. Jungkook and Jimin received a letter. Not a settlement. Not an apology. Just a line from the judge's opinion. An artist's identity is not a commodity. It is a birthright. They cried. Not because they won, but because they survived long enough to. Untethered returned. Bigger. Global. This time they rented a stadium. Not to prove anything, but to celebrate everyone who stayed. The banners read, "No more names for sale." They danced. They sang. And at the end, they stood on the edge of the stage, arms around each other. Jungkook looked at Jimin. "You started this when you stood up after that shove." Jimin smiled. "You finished it when you never let go." The crowd roared. Not for idols. Not for revolution. But for truth. And this time, no one could ever take it away. The final show of Untethered's global series had been announced without fanfare. No press conference. No interviews. No label sponsors. Just a single poster uploaded silently across their accounts. A stark black background. 2 silhouettes in motion. A single line beneath them. "We began as performers. We end as people." The venue? Unlisted. The date? Private. It was invitation only. Not for celebrities. Not for influencers. Not for business partners. They invited dancers. Former idols. Trainees who never debuted. Staff who were silenced. Journalists who had told the truth and been blacklisted for it. Fans who had been with them since the first